So we were able to salvage business buildings that were going bad as well as businesses that were going bad because the funds were indiscriminate. It was to stop vacant lots, proliferation of vacant lots. After Harold, along came Daley. And Daley again began fast-tracking the demolition of housing in Chicago. They tore down a veteran's house. She was serving in Iraq. They tore down her house in a matter of 2 weeks. She came home and the house was gone. The neighbors had been taking care of the house. The house was in perfect condition. But that's what fast tracking allows them to do. If you don't respond to their summons for whatever reason, they have the right to tear that house down in 2 weeks. As you drive through places in Chicago, you see houses boarded up and they're usually right next to one another because it's a domino effect. That erodes your tax base because those houses are not on the tax roll. So you're right. People from outside of the United States, internationally, are buying property right here in Chicago. We need to put restrictions on the purchase of that property and put requirements in place. Give them a time frame during which they have to develop that property and make it revenue producing from the tax perspective. Be it a business or a home. The other thing that we're doing in Chicago is we're tearing down businesses and building houses where those businesses used to be. 63rd Street is an excellent example. That used to be a strong business district in our community. That used to be a strong business district in our community. There are now houses there, but no businesses. That means that there aren't people working. There was a time when if you were at an L station in Chicago, early in the morning, when the train would pull in, you better get out of the way because people were moving fast. There were bunches of them. Now you can stand there and nobody gets off because people aren't working in our community. 97% of African American youth are unemployed. Our teens, 97%. No one else suffers from that kind of drop in employment. Their parents are not working. These children are not in school. We averaged a 50% dropout rate over the last several years. That is wholly unacceptable, and that dropout rate is higher in our community because it's tied to economics. Children depend upon that little job at Burger King or McDonald's to be able to buy clothes to wear to school. And there's pressure nowadays. If you don't look popular, you're not popular, and you're bullied. And bullying sometimes is silent, but you're excluded. So we have to have a better plan to ensure that we're taking care of these properties that exist in Chicago and keeping them on the tax roll.
Let's segue to her question.
Sure.
So what about those homes that could be rehabilitated and the opportunities that should be the people in the community? For example, I'm a real estate broker and there is an opportunity to be, the first 15 days something's on a listing. If it is home path, you can buy it before the investor does. But I see that this is not the trend. For example, just wrote a letter, we found the owner to this property my husband and I want to buy. We're brokers, we know how to get a property. But this bank never allowed it to be accessible to the community members. So this property was purchased several months ago. They want to flip it for a crazy rate or sit on it and hold it as a vacant and dangerous property for another year only for profit. And I went to them, well, ready to give them some money for it and give them a profit. They cussed us out and told us they were banning us to lose their number. That's how hostile they were. And we even prefaced it with, he said, my wife, she loves the community, she's an advocate, and blah, 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 blah. And that was the response. It was hostile. So how do we communicate with the banks when they have this property and make sure that it's accessible to the community members? Because there is financing available where you can buy them and fix them with your money with low interest and not have all that overhead where it's not affordable anymore.
That's where the city's Department of Housing comes in. We have a major city Department of Housing. You have people who are counselors who will sit down with people who are interested in buying property in Chicago. They have to be trained to have a listening ear, to sit down with someone like yourself, and when they hear that this is a problem, when that bank has crossed the line, they need to get engaged with you and make sure that that bank is talking to you fairly, honestly, and trying to resolve the issue in Chicago, which is, houses losing their value and becoming vacant lots, which, as you indicated, are dangerous places. There's syringe needles around, people get taken advantage of in those, around those vacant lots. So the city's Department of Housing needs to get involved, and if necessary, moderate and mediate the situation. Because if they become impossible, if they become negative, if they become arrogant, that's not in the community's best interest. They have a license to operate. They receive funding. Oftentimes these banks have government contracts, so they provide bonding and insurance.
Right.
So we have the tools necessary to hold them accountable.
Yes, we do.
We just need to decide to do it. There is a concerted effort to allow our community to deteriorate. It's a concerted effort. I used to have a comedy club in Detroit, and I saw Detroit go through its major transition. You would ride over on the east side and you'd see an entire 4 square block area with just one house sitting there. Well, meanwhile, the city of Chicago has to provide water, sewer, curb service, pave the streets. They have to provide infrastructure services. There has to be electricity and electrical poles for that one house. But there's no return on that city revenue, that city spending. There's no revenue coming in terms of tax, because when it was a completely filled block, it was paying for itself. But now you only got one house sitting there, and that one house can't sustain all of the development that goes in to make it, and it's required. And that's why Detroit is now bankrupt. Well, the only city that has a bond rating as negative, or nearly as negative as Detroit, is Chicago. We have the second lowest bond rating of any major city. We're 3 stages above junk bond status. So that means we spend more money to borrow and build in Chicago. That's called, how you doing? Come in. Good to see you. Yeah. That's called waste. So we have to address that. And we have a Department of Housing that's there, positioned, and ready to do it. We just need to engage them in that process. Now, go right ahead.
Every 10 years we have a census. Every 10 years we have a remap or redistricting. Every 10 years our communities are more fragmented. If mayor, what would you do to stop the political gerrymandering that we see happening in our communities?
Yeah, it's interesting because I see Bruce and Will here, and they're fighting that redistricting, that current redistricting. They've been a part of every major movement to challenge the gerrymandering, not just in Chicago, but throughout the state of Illinois. It used to be that the 3rd Ward, for example, was compact and contiguous, as the law requires. The 3rd Ward went from King Drive, all the way to the projects just across State Street, and it stopped there. And the people in that community were alike in a lot of ways. They spoke the same language, they had the same issues, they had the same concerns. Their children played ball against one another, so they were united in a sense. And it was easy to challenge things that the aldermen did because there was a communication network. It was compact and contiguous. But then they started stretching the 3rd Ward out west. Now the 3rd Ward runs all the way to Pulaski. So you have the black community here, you have the Asian community, then you have the Latino community, and then you have the white community. Well, these people all speak different languages, and they all have different concerns. So it is difficult for a challenger to galvanize those people to do anything that benefits the community. And it's an incumbency protection plan. So the mayor has input, the mayor has input into the redistricting plan. It really ought to be done by a demographer, a computer technician, and a lawyer. Take the people out of it, and it should make sense, both on the state level and the local level. And until you do that, you're not going to get fair mapping in the city of Chicago as a result of the census. Now, one of the things that's the elephant in the room, and one of the things that makes me different from other candidates is I understand Chicago's economic needs. We have an $8.9 billion budget proposed for 2015. $1 billion of that is debt service. Now give me just a moment. I'm going to take you on a quick trip. 1833, you had some very aggressive people who says Chicago has potential. Ladies and gentlemen, elect us, your representatives, and we're going to build this city. Like Burnham said, make no small plans. We're going to build this city, and we're going to turn Chicago into a mecca. It's going to be great right here on the southern shores of Lake Michigan. And the people said, sounds good to me. You have our authority. We vote you in. You're our elected representative. And those people promised them that they would build their roads, their curbs, their gutters, their sewers, their sidewalks. They would take care of the entire infrastructure. But those people didn't have any money. So those people went to the bankers. And they said, Mr. Banker, we promised to build this city. We need money. Can we borrow some money from you? And the banker said, well, we're in the business of lending money. So yes, you can borrow money from us, but at the end of the year, when those people pay their taxes, we want you to pay us back our principal with interest. Sound familiar? Yeah. That's what happens. That interest, in the government sense, is called debt service. Our current debt service is $1 billion. So if we have a budget in Chicago that's $8.9 billion, we really only have $7.9 billion to spend on city services. The other $1 billion goes in the pockets of those banksters. They get that. They're guaranteed that. By 2016, that'll be $1.3 billion. By 2018, that'll be $1.7 billion. You see where this is going? That's why we have the second lowest bond rating of any major city in America. That's why we're 3 stages above jump bond. And the closer you are to jump bond status, the more it costs to borrow money. So, what we have to do is stop using the credit card to pay our bills. Because with the credit card comes what? Interest, which is called debt service. So what we do is we use debt to fund services. You cannot continue to exist like that. We have to transition Chicago from a debt-to-fund services revenue and expenditure system into a pay-as-you-go revenue and expenditure system. How many people tore up their credit cards, cut up their credit cards, and got debit cards? Because that's money that you put in, right? Everybody. Because that's money that you have to spend. That's like cash. We need to do the exact same thing. How you doing? Come on. We need to do the exact same thing with Chicago. Transition Chicago from a debt-to-fund services revenue and expenditure system into a pay-as-you-go revenue and expenditure. Now, how do we do it? First of all, we have $1.7 billion in our TIP fund, unused, uncommitted. You take that $1.7 billion and you pay down that debt. So now that's $1.7 billion less that you're buying. Why is that important? Because if you leave it in the